Hell yeah! What's up, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the 2022 grand finale, episode 52 of the Sailor Jerry podcast. My name is Matt Cothran. I am still your host. Today is Thursday, December 29th, 2022. And yes, ladies and gentlemen, now more than ever, Sailor Jerry Spice Drum is still made the old school way, 92 proof, bold and smooth as hell. What have I become, ladies and gentlemen? It is the holiday season. We just got through Christmas. If you celebrate Christmas, I hope it was a great one for you. We're heading in to New Year's Eve and then New Year's Day. Heading into 2023. And ladies and gentlemen, I am in full holiday swing and I have let myself go. Okay, I cannot stop eating. Full disclosure, I just can't stop. It's cookies, it's casserole, it's all sorts of shit. You know, it's unavoidable at this point. Everywhere I look, something delicious is just right around the corner. You know what I'm saying? But life is good. Christmas was awesome. You know, I'm a big fan of this time of year, as most of you listeners out there know. Going into 2023, I just want to wish the best to everybody out there. Thank you for another incredible year of the Sailor Jerry podcast. We made it through year 2, okay? And we got year 3 coming up. And man, you know, I'm grateful. So thank you. You know, thank you to Dana Dynamite at Sailor Jerry. Thank you to all the listeners of the Sailor Jerry podcast worldwide. Thank you to all of our amazing guests that have been on this year. It's been really cool, and it continues to grow, and it continues to be something very, very special and near and dear to my heart. So thank you guys very much for another great year. Onward to 2023. If I had a New Year's resolution, it would probably be to get back on the treadmill, to get outside, to get some more movement in my muscles and in my bones. And that naturally happens as a new year starts, you know, so it's all good. Another moral to the story: don't be so hard on yourself in 2023. You know what I'm talking about? It's time for episode 52. Finn McKenty is the voice of the people. In this very special 2022 wrap-up episode, we take a look back at the year in music with one of alternative culture's greatest commentators. We also set our sights on 2023 and try to predict what artists and or records will be. We also set our sights on 2023 and try to predict what artists and records will have a big year. Finn is an awesome dude. I've been looking forward to this interview. You know, in an age of content and everyone just trying to come up with a headline to get you to click on it, Finn's a guy who has substance beyond that clickable headline. You know what I'm saying? When you watch his stuff, there's always some meaning to it. And that's refreshing in this era. So this is an awesome way to end the year. Kick back, relax, pour yourself some Sailor Jerry, and let's go. What up, Finn? How you doing?
Good. How about you?
I'm doing good, man. Can you hear me all right?
Yes, sir.
Nice. What's shaking?
Oh, just the usual.
Nice, man. Nice. I just watched your video on Ice-T and body count.
Oh, thank
Uh,
you.
yeah, man. It was really really cool. It brought back a lot of memories for me because I was born in East LA, and that moment in time, I was born in 1979,
Okay.
and that
Yeah.
moment in time, I mean, that era of music and censorship and all that stuff was just, it was absolutely, it was crazy. And it's wild to look back on. And you got some props from Ice-T. How does that feel when you get, the OG looking at your videos and giving you respect like that?
The literal actual OG. The reason that anybody knows the term OG is because of this man.
That's
I
right.
mean, if you would have told 13-year-old me, I saw Body Count at Lollapalooza '91 when I was 13. If you would have told 13-year-old me that, Ice-T 30 years later would be watching a video that I made and say my name, my head would just exploded like that meme from Scanners, just the guy's head blows up. That's what would have happened. So really cool. It's always a little bit scary, but also cool to know that a lot of the people I talk about will end up actually watching the video. So any video I make, I pretend the person I'm talking about is standing next to me. Would I say the same thing if they were standing next to me? That's how I think about it. And, to get a nod from someone like him is amazing.
Yeah, that's dope, and that's a good way to look at it, because you do, you tackle a lot of polarizing figures and topics, and you do it in a way, that's honest. But you also, I mean, you had me thinking like, is MGK actually a good person? Is he a good art? Is he a good art? Is he a
Maybe
good
not.
artist? Is he
Maybe
a good
not.
artist? What the
He's a
hell's
good rapper.
happening here? Yeah, exactly. But how do you, how do you walk that line?
Well, I think about it again. I just think about it like, would I say the same thing if the person was standing next to me? And I feel fine. Like, I like to make jokes about stuff, right? So I have two channels for anyone who's not familiar. On my main channel, I do pretty straightforward like video essays where I try to just like keep it to the facts because that's what that audience wants. And in those situations, I try to tell the story in the way that I think genuinely reflects what happened, which is oftentimes not the way that people think it happened. And I don't always know the facts, but when I can, I try to reach out to the people involved and find out. For example, I made a video about a guy named Ronnie Radke, who a lot of
Yeah.
people, people say, oh, Ronnie Radke killed somebody. Well, no, he didn't. He went to prison, but he went to prison for a parole violation. And I'm not here to like defend Ronnie Radke or anybody else, but I think the facts matter. Like, we live in an era where people just react to headlines. They, see something on Reddit or whatever on Twitter and just react to the headline without ever questioning what actually happened. And so on those videos, I try to practice critical thinking and teach the audience a little bit of that, of like, well, you can look up Ronnie's like criminal record. It's a matter like, these are public records. You can look him up on Inmate Finder and see all this stuff. So on those videos, I try to really get to the heart of what actually happened to the best of my knowledge. And if I don't know, I'm going to say, I don't know what actually happened, but from what I could tell, here's what it looks like. Because, another one of the big problems I think that we have, like as a society, is people who are, unwilling to say, I don't know.
Yeah.
And with things like music, it's, the artist says one thing, the label says another thing, the fans say a third thing, and it's hard to know what really happened. And I do my best to get to that. As far as the other stuff and talking shit, on my second channel, I have more fun. That's a little bit more like, I look at that as a comedy channel. To my knowledge, I mean, I'm sure there's some artists that I, make a joke about that might get mad about it. But I think most people understand that I'm just busting their balls, especially if I'm making fun of like their haircut from 2004 or something like that. If you're going to get mad about that, that's on you. You know what I mean? I would
Yeah.
hope that people understand my intentions, which is just to make people laugh.
Yeah, man, that's awesome. I think it shines through, for sure. Do you remember the first wave of Buddyhead? Do you
Oh
remember
yeah,
that back in the Travis was getting his ass kicked all the time.
he went pretty hard.
Yeah, he went pretty hard, man. And I feel like that's definitely one way to do it. And it was a legendary run, that first wave of Buddyhead. But how do you feel about the word critic?
I wouldn't use that term for myself because I don't actually talk very much about the music itself.
Yeah.
Like I don't really give my opinion on the music very often because I feel like critics in my mind, and I'm not talking about anyone in particular, but to me, critics are kind of useless in the current era. Because like when we were kids, you couldn't hear it before you bought it, right? So like you would read Spin magazine or something and be like, okay, this sounds like it's cool. I have $12 to my name. I'm going to trust this review and spend the only $12 I have on this because this person in Spin magazine said it was cool.
Yeah.
And so critics, I think, were useful then. But now anybody can hear anything they want. So why do you need my opinion on it? You can just go listen to it for yourself and decide whether you like it or not. So what I try to do is give people context around it so that when they listen to it, maybe they can understand it or interpret it in a different way and maybe understand why it is or isn't significant or whatever. I respect people to come to their own opinion about the music. I just try to kind of color in the area around that, if that makes sense.
Yeah. You lead the people to the water. The water. And if they want,
but who am I to tell you that who am I to tell you what you should or shouldn't like? I mean, that's stupid.
Have you ever had an artist, be super pissed off, the opposite of Ice-T? Has someone ever been like, what the fuck?
There's really only one person that comes to mind who got upset with me. Other than that, I mean, I'm sure they're out there, but people seem to be. I mean, I think artists.
Who was it, Finn? Who was it?
It was your man, Machine Gun Kelly, was not happy.
Oh,
with
he
me.
was. Oh, you got pissed?
Yeah, which I thought was kind of, I was surprised by that because, like, honestly, why should he care what I think? Like, he's rich and famous. He's got a 2 Billboard #1 albums. Like, I'm a nobody. Why should he care what I think?
Yeah, but he seems like he's that dude, though. He's reading the comments. He's watching all the videos. He wants to know exactly, especially because I feel like he had a microscope on himself for a while with all that shit that he was going through, and it was such a weird vibe. I mean,
and to be fair, I think people are unfairly hard on him. I don't think he does himself any favors. I think he sort of makes himself an easy target. But I also think he's correct that, people in the rock scene are like unfairly hard on him. Really, I mean, I think he's right about that. Like, for example, people say that Eminem ruined his rap career. False. He had a top 10 album like the next year after that. Hotel Diablo was his biggest rap album ever after Eminem supposedly ruined his career and ran him out of rap. That's not true. So I try to, to answer your question from before, and I think he's a really good rapper. I wouldn't necessarily choose to listen to his music, but I think he's really good. So to answer your question from before, I try to give people credit where it's due. And I try to call it like I see it.
Yeah, man, that makes sense. What do you think about Travis Barker's kind of Phil Spector? He's just going for, the DTA. He's going to take over pop punk, basically. He wants to produce every song. He wants to do all this stuff, which I back completely. Nothing against that. But, and not that it's funny to say, it's funny to actually look at pop punk like it was ever really a serious thing. But it seems
it sold millions of records.
Yeah. But it seems like now, at least to guys like myself, that it's like, man, like there really is no sense of realism to the genre anymore. It just seems like it's not really something it seems like it's 100% manufactured nowadays. Is there any hope for pop punk going forward in 2023?
Well, I see your point. But as far as it's a lot of I guess we'll say very TikTok friendly kind of solo artists doing a lot of this stuff. Like for example, Jaden, who's on Travis's label DTA, which he does. I am biased because he one of the people he does the label with is my friend Johnny Minardi. Shout out to Johnny. Jaden is incredibly good looking, and it makes me hate myself every time I see him. I'm angry at the world that I did not win the genetic lottery like he did. And I think it might be easy for old people like us to look at someone like Jaden and be like, oh, he's just this pretty boy from TikTok who, met Travis Barker, and Travis handed him all this music, and that's what this is. But I don't really think that's true. I think it may seem like that to us, and in some cases that probably is true, right? There are some examples of that, I'm sure. But it's not the case there's plenty of times where that's not the case. I think there's a lot of these kids that are genuinely into this stuff, and it's not like Blink-182 and New Found Glory or some kind of like secret knowledge that only the cool kids know about. I mean, these are like Billboard top 10 bands that sold millions of records. It's not crazy to think that a 20-year-old could sincerely like that stuff. Now, that being said, nobody's obligated to like this new generation of pop punk, but I just, this is the thing that old people do all the time, is they, look down on and discredit the new generation and assume that, we did it for the right reasons, but these kids now are doing it for the wrong reasons. Well, guess what? We were dumbass 20-year-olds just like they are. Every 20-year-old guy is a fucking idiot.
Yeah, that's a good point, my man. It's a good point. I've been looking forward to having this conversation with you because, I'm relatively new to the Finn McKenty world. I've been watching your videos for about 2 years now, and
that's a while.
And keeping up with the podcast and stuff. But I really appreciate your take on stuff because, like you're saying, older music dudes are hilarious. You know what I mean? It's just it's
one way to put it.
Yeah, the shit that can come out of my mouth and anyone that I know is amazing. So. I appreciate you have such a well-rounded take, and it's really cool because I find myself nowadays, being in a band for 20 years and especially like underground punk rock stuff and the way the music industry has changed. There's so much to like, there's so much to bitch about, but it's also like the thing that's crazy is you lose sight of that. There's so much to be stoked on too. There's so many good bands. There's so much great music going on. The technology is changing for the better just as much as it's changing for the worse. So perspective is a really, really important thing, I believe, now in music and in art. And you really help bring that to the forefront with the content you make, my man.
Well, I appreciate that. Thank you. My point of view is, people... There's a lot of people that, think of me as some sort of like grouchy hater or something like that. It's the complete opposite of that. My point of view in general is that I'm excited to see the next generation making shit, like basically. And I'm excited about this current generation, and I will be excited about the next one and the next one after that and the next one after that. Whether I like it or not is secondary. I think that, I've been around long enough that I've seen this happen so many times, as I'm sure you have, is like every generation of kids makes some stuff and the people, the older people say that it's trash and then rinse and repeat forever. And if I had one kind of point that I would like to make or message I'd like to send to everyone, it's like, just don't be that person. Don't hate, congratulate. Be stoked for what the next generation is doing. You don't have to like it, but just be stoked that there's a generation of kids who are motivated to make shit the same way you were when you were their age.
Yeah, man. Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. For our listeners out there, I would love to get a little bit of history on you because obviously you've been doing this for a long time. And I know you've had, you've had a lot of different avenues and alleyways in your career as a writer and getting to where you are now. So going back, not all the way, not to the womb, but just to like when music kind of first, came into your life, how did it kind of first start taking effect on you?
Well, my mother and father fucked on New Year's Eve of 1978. And it was all downhill from there. I discovered, that's a true story, by the way. I discovered music Probably around 1987 or 88 through MTV. I guess it was MTV Raps. Whatever rap show was on MTV at the time. I don't know how I discovered it. Whatever, it was just on TV, and rap was the thing that really caught my attention first. This was like the golden age of EPMD, Eric B. and Rakim, Cool G Rap, all that stuff. And then a couple years after that, I, again, through MTV, discovered Suicidal Tendencies. They had been banned from playing in LA for I think 5 years or something like that. And because of all the gang shit at their shows back then. You being from, my cousins are from LA, from, a couple parts of the LA area. And I went there in the 80s and stuff, 80s, early 90s. And it was a different world back then. Santa Monica and Venice, you go there now and it's hipster central. And those were not good places in the 80s. I'd never been to East LA back then, but I would imagine same story there. So Suicidal Tendencies had been banned from playing in LA because there was a lot of gang violence and stuff at their shows in the 80s. They did an MTV News segment about their first show back in LA in 1990. And I was like, I don't know what this is, but it's fucking cool. And I'm into it from now on. And so that was kind of the thing that got me into all this stuff.
Yeah, man. Suicidal, it can't be understated how important of a band they were and continue to be. I mean, I saw them last year, and it's crazy. They got Ben from Dillinger playing with them now. But shout out to Ben. But they're still amazing. And you look back at songs like Trip at the Brain and, all this stuff. With their kind of crossover, when they started getting pretty metal, was dude, it was unstoppable, dude. It was so awesome. What about some other bands from around that time? What were you kind of coming up with?
I was into that crossover kind of stuff, like DRI, Sepultura. I mean, they're kind of crossover-ish, I guess, but DRI, Sepultura, The Accused. There was a band from Seattle back then called Forced Entry, like a thrash band. I was into that stuff, but then a couple years after that, I think there was a zine back then, which people may be familiar with, called Maximum Rock and Roll. It was sort of the definitive punk zine that basically covered the entire global underground punk and hardcore scene, which I bought at Tower Records in Seattle back then, and that's sort of what introduced me to all the bands that you would see behind me. I don't know if you're making a video version of this, but bunch of old 90s hardcore kind of stuff that I'd gotten into through there. Earth Crisis was probably the definitive band of that era for me. There's a band from Seattle called Undertow that was kind of our big hardcore band. Got into Youth of Today, Gorilla Biscuits, all that kind of stuff. Kind of more of the hardcore side of things, but I've always listened to everything. Like I said, I discovered rap before all this stuff. I've always listened to rap and pop and hardcore and death metal. I was really into death metal in the 90s, like Morbid Angel and Obituary, Deicide, all that kind of stuff. So I've always listened to everything. I would listen to, Earth Crisis, Madonna, Green Day, and, No Doubt on the same mixtape.
Yeah, there was Earth Crisis was a fork in the road for me in high school because a lot of us, we all were listening to punk rock, and then, a lot of us were listening to hardcore. It was Youth of Today, Gorilla Biscuits, stuff like that. But then when Earth Crisis came on the scene, it got,
metal.
It got metal and it got militant.
It did.
I always talk about it being the same as there's a scene in the movie Big Wednesday where they all have to go in front of the draft board for Vietnam, and some of them volunteer to go into Vietnam, and some of them dodge the draft, and that's what it was like. There was a moment for all of us where it was okay, I legitimately had friends that were I'm dedicating myself to hardcore, and it was a couple of us were no, that's not we're going down the punk path, we're not going down that road. And it was a really kind of crazy
drill
time.
sergeant kicked you out of the force.
Yeah. Dude,
you make me sick. Dude, get out of my sight.
I'll never forget. I had a buddy, Dion, and he wrote in my high school yearbook. It said Matt, one day you will know the truth of hardcore.
Did you ever find the truth of hardcore?
I haven't found it yet. I mean, I love it. I can listen to Earth Crisis. There's still time. It's out there somewhere. But yeah, it was a really, looking back on it, it's an incredibly fun time in music too, because, like you said, there were all those different sort of things happening. There were so many great shows happening. What type of person were you at shows? Were you back? Were you front row? Were you stage diving? Were you moshing? What were you like?
I've never been really like big into like dancing or anything, partly because like I moved to Cleveland in 1996, and that
No
was
dancing in Cleveland.
oh, there's a lot of fucking well, One Life Crew, if you remember that band, they had a line which in the song said violence Cleveland style, we don't dance, we just fight. Which is pretty accurate. And I wanted no part of that.
Yeah.
And I'm glad because I'd probably be missing some teeth or something like that if I did. So I was happy to just like hang out and watch the bands. I'm not trying to prove to anybody that I'm like the biggest pit warrior.
So when did you decide to? Did you write first? Were you writing, reviews
Like
or zines?
writing
How did?
zines or
Yeah, like how did you
yeah.
get into like kind of finding your own voice as a commentator and like being a someone who wants to document the scene?
Yeah, well, the reason I asked about writing is because I was also very into graffiti in the '90s.
Really?
Yeah, which was a big thing for me. A couple of the guys, if anybody listening happens to know about graffiti, I went to high school with a couple of the guys who were kind of the original members of BTM, which is a crew that's still around. BTM, and I think maybe one of them was in US, but US and BTM were like two of the big crews for me as a kid, which are still really influential to me. So shout out to anybody who may know US or BTM. But I started doing zines in like 1992, I think, maybe 93. And they were terrible. I had no idea what I was doing. I was like 14, 15 years old. But I saw, I saw some of them in Maximum Rock and Roll. And I just reached out to bands that I wanted to interview because I basically said there was a bunch of bands at that time, which they called like the power violence scene at the time. Bands like Capitalist Casualties, Rest in Peace to Spider Mike, No Comment, Man is a Bastard, Despise You, all that kind of stuff. And nobody was really covering that stuff at the time. And even though I was like 15, I was like, well, nobody else is going to do it, so I guess I will. So I just wrote a letter to them because that's what you did back then. I said, hey, this is who I am. I'm 15 years old. I have a zine. Do you want to do an interview? And they're like, yeah, okay. So Mike from Capitalist Casualties was the very first person I ever interviewed. Took a chance on me. He unfortunately died. I think it was last year. Really sad to see that. But that was kind of the beginning of all of it. Is just like I found this little lane, this little part of the scene that nobody was really covering, and I sold several thousand of them by the time I was like out of high school. I sold, through the mail and stuff. I sold a few thousand of them all over the world and stuff through the mail, which, it's only a few thousand zines compared to millions of people on YouTube. But honestly, I would say selling a few thousand zines through the mail is harder than getting millions of views on YouTube in a lot of ways.
Yeah, man. I mean, I think that's an incredible place to start, dude. Those are big numbers for a young kid doing his first thing, man. I mean,
Right.
Especially like you're saying, and just the effort of it all, the physical act of putting them together and getting them out in the mail, it seems like once that happened, that you kind of, like you said, you found your lane, you were kind of off to the races because you seem like a very driven dude, especially when it's something that, you're doing that you love and that you care about. And so, once you got that kind of initial rush of getting those out, what was next for you?
My thinking has always been like wherever people's attention is, that's where I'm going to go. So I did zines in the 90s up until maybe the early 2000s. And then took a little bit of a break for a while and started doing some blogs in the 2000s because that became the thing, like the mid to late 2000s. I used to have a blog that got kind of popular sort of in the metal world called Metal Inquisition, where we basically made fun of thrash and death metal kind of stuff in a good-natured way. But that got fairly popular. I wrote a bunch for Metal Sucks, which at the time was one of the bigger metal blogs.
Yeah, is that Sergeant D?
Yes, sir. Yep. And then after blogging sort of, ran its course, I was like, all right, well, I guess people are into YouTube now. So I started doing that in 2017, and here we are. And then I started doing Twitch last year. So basically, I want to be wherever the attention is.
Yeah, how you like Twitch? How you like fucking
It's
with
great.
Twitch? Yeah.
Twitch is awesome. The culture there is way better. I mean, shout out to everyone who watches my YouTube videos. I appreciate it. But people on YouTube, not the nicest people in the world. But Twitch, it's more like, even though you're not physically in the same room with me, obviously, the social norms are more like you're hanging out together. So people tend to be a lot cooler on Twitch, and I really appreciate that.
That's dope, man. That's dope. Let's get into some band stuff a little bit here. I'm curious to get your take on what makes a good front man or front woman.
Well, the most important thing is something that I talk about it all the time, but charisma is the thing that matters more than anything else. You don't hear people talk about this very often because I think it's kind of poorly understood, and it's not something that I really understood until maybe like 10 years ago or something like that. Charisma being the ability, and I believe that you're born with charisma, the ability to attract and retain people's attention, which doesn't necessarily mean that they like you. MGK would be a good example of this. If MGK does anything, people care. Whether they like him or hate him, they care, right?
Yeah.
It's just one of those people. Fred Durst is another one of those people that you like him, you hate him, but you care either way. And then there's people like, say, someone like Mike Patton, that pretty much, if you care about Mike Patton, you love absolutely everything that he does. Even though I kind of appreciate how much he dislikes their fans. But charisma, at the end of the day, like if you look at any band, people want to believe that it's about the music, and the music does matter, but this is the entertainment business, not the music business, right? The music business is like people who write songs and produce music and stuff locked up in the studio. Nobody even knows who these people are. The entertainment business is something else. You have to entertain people. And the music does matter, but we can all think of examples of artists who are successful as much for their charisma as for their music, right? Yeah. So I think that is a vital component of any band. You have to have a strong front person. And I think any genre lives or dies by whether it has a handful, at least, of people with that kind of star power. You look at the rise and fall of any genre, it generally corresponds to the rise and fall of the biggest stars in that genre.
Yeah, that's a great point, man. That's a great point. It's like you got to be able to accept the role and step into being the person on stage with the microphone,
yep.
Directing the crowd. You
yep.
got to be able to step into that. I absolutely agree. Who's the least important member of the band?
Well, it's actually hard to know. You don't know unless you know the band, because there are some examples of people, for example, like Charlie Benante from Anthrax. A lot of people, would maybe think he's quote unquote just the drummer, but what people don't know is that he has always written most of their music and plays a lot of the shit on the album because he's the best guitarist in the band, as everyone in the band would agree. So, and there's lots of other bands where, for example, like my friends in Periphery, Matt from Periphery he's a drummer. He doesn't write any of the music. Like the guitarist basically, writes almost everything and programs the drums as well. So Matt basically just, not entirely, but for the most part, plays what Misha writes. But Matt is a brilliant business mind, and he has a super important role in the band in that capacity. So I think it really depends. And you got to understand there's more to the band than just what you see when they're on stage playing.
That's a good point. I remember, for the longest time, I thought the Strokes was like, I thought they all kind of, worked together and wrote together. And
probably
the last thing that I suspected was that Julian wrote all the fucking songs. Like all
That's
the
usually
hits.
the case in most bands. There's one or two people that write everything, and everyone else does what they're told for the most part.
And I was so like when you listen, you can find those early Strokes demos like of him just basically on a keyboard on YouTube or whatever. And it blew my mind, man, just because I did not. It's so funny how you can look at a band and think one thing, but then behind the scenes, it can be a totally different thing. Like you're saying with Charlie, dude, he's crushing in Pantera right now. I mean, that's pretty awesome.
Yeah. So that's one of the things I like to try to communicate in my videos is that there's oftentimes more than meets the eye. I don't always, I'm not saying I know everything and I'm going to tell you guys how it really is, because the larger point is I don't know the whole story. You don't know the whole story. So I think people should hold off on speculating.
Yeah, man. Getting into 2022 here,
yes, sir.
We're wrapping up the year. How would you, on a scale of 1 to 10 in music, how would you give 2022?
All right. Well, my scale, here's my thing. 1 to 10, but no sevens, because 7 is a coward score. It's for fence sitters. Because when you give something a 7, you're kind of saying it's okay, right?
Yes.
You're afraid to take a stand. So that's my rule. No sevens.
No
and
sevens.
if you give something an 8, you're saying it's pretty good. If you give something a 6, you're saying, it's not that hot.
Yeah. 6 is basically a 5.
Exactly. And a 5 is basically a 1.
It's true.
To me, it comes down to thumbs up or thumbs down.
Yeah.
I would give this year a 6, which is not bad.
Which is a 5, which is a 1.
But exactly. If I had to go one way or the other. I mean, it's not a 10, right? It's not a 10. So if I had to go one way or the other, reason being that I don't really feel like there were too many big breakout moments or people or songs, or it felt like there's nothing wrong with it. It's not like it was bad, but I didn't really feel like there was any big moments as far in a positive way. I mean, there's a couple unfortunate ones like Takeoff, getting shot.
Yeah, Taylor Hawkins. There's a bunch of shitty stuff.
But I didn't, even in the mainstream, I just don't really feel like there were any real breakout moments this year. But it's not nothing bad. It's not as bad. It's just kind of like, I feel like nothing really happened.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I think that it's been kind of a lot. There was a lot of cool carryover stories from 2021.
Yep.
Obviously Turnstile continuing to have a huge year, get the Grammy nods, and a lot of stuff like that. But as far as great things specifically launching or happening in 2022, I mean, outside of Kid Rock dropping "We the People," I think
that's right. Your man Kid Rock reminding that freedom is not free. The only real patriot.
The last patriot.
That's right.
Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, and even like going back on records and stuff, there was some cool stuff that came out this year for sure, but it doesn't feel, and this is one thing I wanted to ask you, and this is kind of going back to what we were talking about originally with, you don't want to be the old guy who's like, nothing fucking good is happening.
Yeah.
But do you think, do you think there's another genre out there? Do you think would there ever be like a new wave of something that just crashes like Nirvana did or something like that?
Yes. I don't know what it's going to be.
What do you think it's going to be?
I don't know. I don't think anybody knows because I've seen this happen so many times. I feel like every, 5 years or something, I feel this way of like, music's over. Nothing cool will ever happen again. I'm over it. And then something always happens that, comes along and I'm like, oh shit, this is fucking cool. I did not see this coming. This is amazing. I don't know what it's going to be. But as a couple examples of that, like I think Cloud Rap was that, with like Young Lean and, Blade and all the Drain Gang stuff like 10 years ago was that. I think when like basically the XXL like 2016 freshman class, which was like Lil Uzi Vert, Lil Yachty, Denzel Curry, and 21 Savage. I think there's one other person I'm forgetting, but like that was big. Like the kind of Migos era felt like really cool and fresh to me when like Bad and Bougie blew up. I think, stuff like that. You don't know what it's going to be. But it comes along and you're like, oh, this is cool. I didn't expect this. Hyperpop felt like it could have been that, which kind of came out in like 2020. But it felt like it kind of fizzled. One thing, definitely emo rap was that for sure. Yeah. Like Uzi, Juice, Peep, and X. But unfortunately, they all died. I think that was about to be the next Nirvana, actually. I mean, and those artists were all super successful, but they obviously they all died right before they were really about to like reach their potential, I think. So that was about to be the next big thing, I think, like the next like generational game changing thing. So that was really sad. One thing that's happening right now that I think is interesting, I don't know yet where it's going to go. but is it's kind of obscure stuff. But you may, I think Fantana may have talked about it a little bit. The Haunted Mound, like Cemetery and all those guys. So basically, they're Haunted Mound. The Cemetery is I guess you would call him a rapper, but it's like super deep fried and distorted. Imagine like a combination of like Witch House, like Salem with Chief Keef, but he wears like black metal shirts and Affliction jeans.
No.
It's very advanced stuff.
That sounds like a nightmare. I'm gonna be honest with you. Does it sound good?
No, it's terrible. But in a great way.
Well, that's the thing. So is terrible the new breakthrough?
Well,
is terrible the new good?
It's postmodern. You know, it's very referent. You know, it's very postmodern. So it's I would say inaccessible by design in the same way as like black metal was, right? Black metal was saying like death metal sounds too slick and accessible now. Fuck this shit. We want to sound like shit. And how instead of these like super detailed multicolor oil paintings on our cover, we're just gonna have some fucked up photocopy of like a guy screaming in the corner of his basement. And so I think the Haunted Mound Cemetery kind of stuff sort of reminds me of that. Whether that will, and it definitely has like an underground following. Whether it will like break through into something bigger, you know, we'll have to see.
What is it about hip hop that kind of like, it seems like it's always, you know, leading the way when it comes to kind of, you know, especially now.
Everything.
Know what I mean? And like, so what do you think it is about hip hop culture that is like just a little bit ahead of everybody else? Or at least maybe if not ahead, just a little bit more. It seems like there's less, you know, like it's just a freer creative environment. You know what I mean?
I think that's what it is. Rock has become very traditionalist, where if it doesn't sound like something, sound and look and act like something from 20 or 30 years ago, the rock culture rejects it. And I don't know why that happened, and it's really sad because that's like the antithesis of what rock always was, right? Like it was like rock and roll was never supposed to be your fucking dusty ass dad's music, right? Where they're like expecting you to rigidly conform to like, why doesn't this look and sound like something from when I was in high school in 1995? That's like the exact opposite of what rock and roll should have been. And for whatever reason, hip hop culture has really taken that torch and run with it.
Yeah, it's really, I mean, it's exciting to see. I mean, it's like, I wish it was that way for every, you know, major genre, but it's like, I don't know what it is about rock and roll that just loves going backwards. They love staying in that fucking, like, dude, the band that blows my mind is Greta Van Fleet. Like, they're like the worst band in the world to me. And I don't get like how the fuck, you know, like bands like Metallica's taking them out on tour, and all these bands are like falling all over them.
Why?
I'm just like, dude, this is horrible, you know. And it's like, there's certain things like with that, and then it's like on the flip side of that, like another band that I, you know, and I don't want to sound like I'm talking too much shit here, even though I am, but a band like Imagine Dragons, who's like, it just feels like they're strictly like reserved for like corporate events and like radio festivals, you know. And it's just like, what even is that band? And it's like, man, like rock music can be so depressing sometimes, you know, because it just feels like the bar is so low, and it's just like you're better off sounding like something that has already been done before and that was a success than trying to like do something cool and creative and new.
Yeah, because if you try, the rock fans are just going to reject you and hate you for it.
Yeah, it makes no fucking sense.
And they don't even want to claim their wins. I was just talking about this on Twitch the other day. So I was looking at the list of Spotify songs with over 1 billion plays. There are 335 songs with over 1 billion plays. So it's a fairly small list. And there are a lot of like rock and alternative kind of artists on that list, or like alternative adjacent. For example, Olivia Rodrigo has 4 songs on that list. So Olivia Rodrigo alone is over 1% of that list. And rock fans will not fucking accept her. Like, it's a fucking rock. It's an alternative rock album. Obviously, it's not fucking Suicide Silence. It's not the most edgy thing in the world. But like, You listen to it, it sounds like it could have been on 120 Minutes in the 90s. Like, it just does. And rock fans should be excited about this. Even if you don't like it, you should claim your wins. You should be like, look, rock is back. Olivia Rodrigo is putting up numbers. Shout out to Olivia. But they don't want to have anything to do with her.
No.
Juice WRLD is on that list. Uzi is on that list. And, like, Lil Uzi Vert went to a fucking Lorna Shore show. Like, the guy is part of the culture. Same with, like, Juice WRLD. These people, like, talk about Escape the Fate and shit. Like they like the same shit you like, you know? And these rock people will not claim their wins. I don't get it. Even MGK, whether you like him or not, the guy had 2 Billboard #1 pop punk albums in the last 2 years. You don't have to like him, but respect the fact that he put the genre on the map again.
Yeah, but I think there's also, with stuff like that, I think embracing your wins is also at the same time like admitting the failures of the genre.
Yes, it is, but deal with it.
Yeah,
you got to face reality.
I see, like, you know, hardcore progressing right now. It's doing so well. It's pushing forward. There's so many great bands. Same with metal, and it's just like, you know, I haven't seen, and this is kind of branching off, but just overall, as far as progression in punk rock, it's one of those things that, and I think that's always kind of been one of the negatives about it, is it is a genre that loves to hold on to.
Oh my God.
The same fucking bands all the fucking time.
You go see these like festival lineups in places like Huntington Beach or Spain, and it literally looks like a show from 1993. Like, it's the exact same fucking bands. And there's nothing against the bands, but like you really are like hung up on like Social Distortion and, you know, Pennywise and X in 2022. Like, this is like, again, those are great bands. No like shade on them, but like, this is like what you're like, these are the flagship bands in the current year.
Yeah, that's
I'm
what
44, and those
no,
bands are a little bit before my time.
Yeah, and it's not like, you know, I'm not saying that the punk genre is, you know, overflowing with incredible new talent, but there's a lot of fucking new bands out there. There's a lot of bands that are trying to do stuff, and it's frustrating because you'd love to see that, like, that next, you know, generation like kick over, you know?
Right.
It's like, in a lot of ways, it's like in politics, sometimes it's the same way. Like, I'm thinking,
we're really going to elect 80-year-olds? Really?
Yeah. Like, where are the new people? Like, when is the great changeover going to happen? You know?
Yeah.
You know,
same thing. I mean, you know, with punk, I think it's the same kind of conversation. Is there are a ton of cool new artists out there doing stuff. Punk should never. I mean, look, who am I to say what punk is or isn't? I'm a fucking nobody. But looking at it historically, punk was never supposed to be a specific sound or image, right?
Yeah.
It was like a mentality and a way of life. And if you look back, there are bands that fall under especially back in like the early days, say like the late 70s and early 80s, that sounded wildly different. You know, anything from, you know, Millions of Dead Cops to like, you know, the Weirdos could be considered punk. Or Devo for that matter.
Yeah.
You know, could all be broadly considered punk. And there's a lot of artists now doing all kinds, like, to me, all that hyperpop stuff should have been embraced by punk, because it reminds me of a lot of the stuff kind of in spirit of a lot of the stuff from the late 70s, like that kind of like very like queer, very artsy, just weird ass shit, you know, from like all those like Hollywood bands, that to me is entirely consistent with punk, like, in terms of like ethos. But, you know, the punk dads just want to listen to Pennywise, and nothing wrong with Pennywise. They're a great band, but it's like, are we going to move on? Or there's people like NASCAR Allo, who's on DTA Records. Travis and Johnny signed him, who is I guess you would kind of call him a rapper, kind of, but plays just like very noisy, distorted kind of rap music, but, you know, he has like a Destroy tattoo and wears like a punk jacket and has Liberty spikes and stuff. He should be one of the, like, you know, flagship artists in punk right now, in my opinion, but they don't like him. They don't want to like him. They don't know he exists. You know, I mean, if you want to really just fucking enter the zone of pain, go on the Epitaph Records Facebook page and read the comments about anything they talk about that's from after like 2001.
Oh, the Pain Cave.
And shout out to Brett and Epitaph, by the way. I love Epitaph. I think that of all the labels out there,
they've tried. They've tried.
Yes,
they've
they
tried.
have.
They've tried to sign new bands. They have tried to bring new artists and put them on the radar. They've tried to like step out of their comfort zone too as a label. They've tried to sign different stuff, and absolutely, you know, I think. You know, and you know what Epitaph was in the 90s, especially. I mean, it was, you know, it was at that time where you were searching new bands by the label. They were one of the most reliable and the best, you know.
And in the 2000s too, they had Escape the Fate, they had Architects in America, they had Bring the Horizon in America. They have a stronger batting average than any other label, period. The end. And now they're signing a lot of cool new artists. For example, like there's this artist called Pop Tropica Sluts that are really cool. They have like Lil Lotus, Smart Death. So, you know, Brett, I think, deserves a lot of credit for consistently embracing whatever is new and cool. And he really believes it. He's not like Brett's fucking rich. He doesn't need to work another day in his life. He's in the studio. You go look at his Instagram. He's in the studio with people like Lotus and Smart Death because he genuinely cares about their music. He genuinely backs it. And unfortunately, all the fucking boomers give him nothing but shit for it. And it's got to be frustrating from his perspective because it's definitely frustrating for me.
Yeah, I agree with that, man. Shout out to Brett. And I've always been a huge fan of his. Just, you know, obviously beginning with Bad Religion and the way he looked at their songs differently, the way he wrote lyrically, you know, just everything that he's kind of accomplished and overcome in his life, and the way he looks at music and the music industry and the music business. It's just, he's one of a kind, man. And like you're saying, he does it because he loves it. And then there's the whole recording aspect of what he's done, you know, that way too. So definitely, you know, an all-time figure in the genre for sure, and an important one, and one that's trying his best to push things forward.
Dragging him kicking and screaming into the future.
Yeah, man. All right, so God bless him. God bless you, Brett. Speaking of 2023 here, let's drag ourselves into the future. Let's put on some psychic helmets here. I want to ask you about a couple things, get your opinion on it. Musically speaking, is the metaverse done?
Well, it depends what you mean by metaverse. If you mean like NFTs and 3D goggles, yes. If you mean it in the broader sense of like online communities where people kind of live a second life, for example, you know, I would consider like Discord and fucking, you know, Fortnite and WoW and all these things. I would consider those a metaverse that is just different from Mark Zuckerberg's vision of it. Zuckerberg's vision of it is done. NFTs are fucking stupid and they're trash. And aside from a handful of them, for example, I think the guys in Avenged Sevenfold are doing it right. 99% of NFTs are garbage that are worth less than nothing.
I agree with you on that one. It was a short wave. You know, I got a little excited. For a second. I thought maybe, maybe something cool was going to break through, but man, I think, you know, and the thing about Zuckerberg too is he's such a dork. You know?
Yeah, he's not the right guy to be the face of it.
No, he's not the right guy to be leading the future, you know? So, you know, what about the new Metallica album? Will it be good?
I mean, I heard that one song. I've never liked Metallica, to be honest with you, because I was already into stuff like, what's that?
Not one record?
No, I've never owned a Metallica album in my life because I was already listening to like Sepultura, Destruction, Creator, The Accused, that kind of thing by the time that
you're beyond.
Yeah,
Metallica.
and it's like you can't really, after you've been listening to like Sepultura and Destruction, you can't really go listen to Hit the Lights and be like, oh hell yeah, this is amazing. Obviously, respect to Metallica, they seem like the best guys in the world, and I would be happy to have them as neighbors. The new album, though, I will say, so I say that not to talk shit on Metallica, but just to say that I am not necessarily the person, you know, you should listen to on this. I think it's the best thing they've done in a very long time, at least judging from that one song. I think it sounds great for what it is.
Yeah, I thought Lux Eterna. I think that's a song. Yeah, it was good. It was all right. You know, it was all right. I love how Like now they're just a beacon of just shit talking. Like people ripping the artwork and all this stuff. It's so great.
God, dude, it's like it's the same shit as like Star Wars. Anytime, like I'm not like a big Star Wars fan either, but like anytime Star Wars does anything, it's like the fans just devote all their energy to just tearing every single fucking detail of it apart. I'm like, well, for a bunch of supposed Star Wars fans, you sure seem to fucking hate Star Wars.
Yeah, exactly.
Like,
what
Jesus
about,
Christ, give these guys a fucking break. They're just trying to make a goddamn TV show for you. Jesus Christ. How do you people treat your fucking families? If this is how you treat, oh my God. Metallica fans, it's the same thing. It's like everyone's got a fucking opinion on the kick drum sound and James's fucking haircut, and like, fuck off, man. You people need to go touch grass and touch a tit in that order. Jesus Christ, get a fucking life, people.
Yeah,
or reverse the order, whatever works for you.
I agree, man. I agree. You know, it's like, and it's got to be crazy, you know, to be a band that long and just like you're just like, God, it seems like, you know, the microscope gets worse. You know, the like people like just let them do
If you don't like
thing.
it, that's fine. Just shut the fuck up.
Yes. What about the new Avenged Sevenfold record? Is it going to be good?
I think so. I mean, obviously they're a different band than they were, you know, in 2005, so we can't expect City of Evil Part 2. But the stage was awesome. It's a different band again, but it's definitely the most progressive thing they've ever done. Brooks Wackerman is, in my opinion, the best punk drummer of all time. That guy is a fucking monster. I saw him play we're the same age. I saw him play with Infectious Grooves when we were both like 14 or 15. When we were in fucking 9th grade, he was already better than everybody.
Yeah.
He can play anything. And he has that perfect... The Rev was, of course, like irreplaceable. But if there's anybody on earth who can fill his shoes, it's Brooks Wackerman, because he has that blend of like, you know, the precision of like metal, but also that sort of wildness of punk. And I think he's perfect. So I'm excited for it. People slept on the stage, but remember they have a 16-minute song on there with Neil deGrasse Tyson. Like, they wrote their most progressive, weird shit. And I'm excited to hear it. I love Avenged Sevenfold.
Right on, man. What about the Blink-182 tour? Does it make it all the way through, or does the band implode?
I don't know. This is one of those situations where I wouldn't speculate about that because I don't know the dynamics behind the scenes. I will say that I think it's super cool that they took out Turnstile. That's a moment for hardcore.
Yeah, absolutely, man. That's dope. I did want to talk to you about the business side of things, because I know you're a big marketing guy. I know you do a lot of like coaching as far as, you know, getting people to kind of realize their potential faster when it comes to marketing, when it comes to content creating. And I think that's really cool, man, because you really are, like we talked earlier, I think you're an important figure, you know, in music, but also just the way the world's going. And there's so many different ways for people to express themselves and to find their own voice. And a lot of that is online. And a lot of that is a lot of trial and error. And a lot of it is really fucking hard work. So are there some kind of universal truths that you know about, you know, kind of finding your own lane online, becoming a content creator, you know, talking about music, talking about anything that you love and care about?
Yeah. My overall, I would say two things. Number one is understand that it's most likely going to take you a while to find an audience. It doesn't matter whether it's on TikTok or YouTube or Twitch or whatever it is. I think it takes time to find an audience. I would start on TikTok because right now that is the place where you can find an audience the most quickly, because their algorithm is amazing, because it's powered by Chinese spyware, but that's a whole other conversation. But the fact of the matter is the algorithm is amazing. If you want to build an audience, I would start on TikTok. Number two is you have no choice but to be who you are, meaning that if you are in, and that's a good thing, meaning that let's say you're into something like collecting, antique spoons, right? You might think that is so niche and weird and nobody will be interested in it. It's not true. people will respond to anybody that has like deep expertise and passion for something. People will respond to that. It does not matter what it is. As an example of that, there's a guy named Report of the Week. Do you know him?
Mm-mm.
Super fucking weird guy. You can look him up after this. He's been doing fast food reviews for like, I don't know, 7 or 8 years or something like that. Gets millions of views, like reviewing the new Arby's chicken sandwich or Crunchwrap Supreme or something. He looks and sounds like something out of the 1920s. He wears like a suit with like slick back hair, but he's like 22 years old or something. He's just such an odd guy who, for whatever reason, just is deeply passionate about fast food. You know, you would think, is there an audience for this? On paper, no. But the guy gets millions of views. He crushes it, and everybody loves him. There's another guy named Doug DeMuro who talks about cars. I don't know or care anything about cars, but this man will go on for like 20 minutes about why the fucking 1982, BMW 325i was, such a breakthrough for that brand. And I will listen to every word of it, even though I don't really know or care about any of it. So just trust that if you care deeply about something, if you put it out there into the world, people will find it and they will respond to that.
That's awesome, man. Appreciate that input. What about, it's New Year's time. Are you a resolution guy? Do you have any goals for next year for yourself?
I'm not a resolution guy because I'm more into like the idea of continuous improvement.
Yeah.
I think there's two kinds of people, broadly speaking. There are marathoners and there are sprinters. A lot of creative people are sprinters. They're driven by like deadlines and taking on some big giant project and like killing themselves in the process, barely like falling across the finish line and then sort of collapsing into a heap. That works for some people. I'm not like that. I'd rather like just chip away at something consistently day after day after day after day after day. I don't like the sort of ups and downs. So resolutions, I don't really do that. But goals, I'm having a baby. Well, I'm not. My wife is. But we are having a baby in May. So
awesome. Congrats, man.
Thank you. My goal is, to be the best parent I can possibly be and make sure that the kid has a happy, healthy start to life. That's my goal. And that's really it. Like supporting the family. That's my job, is to support the family. And I will do whatever it takes to do that, period, end of story.
Right on, man. Right on. Love that. Last question for you. Something I ask everybody on the podcast. What to you is the meaning of life?
Oh, gosh. Do you have another hour? Did you ever listen to Shelter?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I go back, for those who aren't familiar, that is a Hare Krishna band from the 90s. I go back to a lot of those ideas. My mom was into a lot of that stuff, which is the reason why when I first heard Shelter, I was already into hardcore, and I knew about a lot of that kind of stuff from my mom. Downset is another band that touched on a lot of the same kind of stuff. Like Downset to me was like the perfect band because I was like, oh, I'm into hardcore, graffiti, and this kind of like metaphysical thinking. And Downset was like all three of those combined into one. I was like, this is the best thing I've ever heard in my life. I don't know that I have the answer to the meaning of life, but I believe in continuously searching for whatever that truth is every moment of every day, which is kind of tiring. That's a lot of work. But I'm glad that I've been doing this, since I was about 14 or 15. My mom kind of got me into this stuff, and I realized you got to put in that work, because if you don't put in that work, the way I think of it is like, if you don't control your own psychology, it's going to control you. And maybe for normal people, they don't have to worry about that, but I do. And a lot of people listening to this probably do. So, I don't know the answer to that question. Maybe I will someday. But I can tell you what is not the meaning of life for sure is chasing worldly bullshit, meaning possessions or status. None of that has ever made anybody happier. People say, you listen to like some billionaires say that money isn't important, or some supermodels say that looks aren't important. You're like, oh, that's easy for you to say, well, who would know better than a billionaire whether money makes you happy? And who would know better than some gorgeous supermodel whether good looks make you happy? And I'm not like rich and I'm not famous, but I made more money than I ever thought I could. And I've certainly gotten more attention than I ever thought I could. And I'm grateful for those things. But they didn't like, you know, if you think that there's some moment where if you achieve X, like, oh, I made it to the top of the mountain, now everything's cool and I'm going to be happy. That's not how it works. You know, happiness can only be found within. And you'll find that by really taking a hard look in the mirror and being honest with yourself. I believe, and I'm sorry if I'm keeping you too long, but
no, you're good.
I'm going to keep you for a couple more minutes because I think this is important shit. I don't talk about this on YouTube because my audience wants me to talk about Slipknot and fucking Green Day, not things that might actually help them improve their life and be happier. But I want to get this out there for anybody that stuck around for the end of this interview. I would encourage, I believe that people know the answers to these questions inside themselves. I think that, like, if you have never listened to Tony Robbins, you should. You might think he's corny, but you should listen to Tony Robbins. He talks about people like hearing the call. I think that all of us have these moments in life where you hear the call, meaning that you know what you're supposed to do. Supposed to do according to whatever fucking force larger than ourselves exists. I don't know what that is, but like you feel that. You're like, I should do this. Like, I have to do this. Yeah. But most of us don't have the courage to answer that call because it's scary. Because it means changing things or it means admitting something that we don't want to admit. Like, we've all had these moments where you might just be in the shower or taking a walk or whatever, and you're just like, I know that what I'm doing right now is not right for me. But you're too scared to commit, right? Or you don't know what to do or whatever. And that's understandable. But you have to admit the truth and you have to answer that call, whatever it is. And I guarantee you, everybody listening to this right now, there's something in the back of your head right now that you're like, fuck, he's right. Like, I know that this thing is true and I've been scared to admit it because it's fucking terrifying. But I hope that listening to this, you would go, okay, well, no more bullshit. I'm going to admit the truth and I may not know what to do about it, but I got to at least start by admitting the truth to myself. One of the most life-changing things that I ever heard was at the end of, I think it's the second Shelter album. If you get the CD, they had extra room to fill, right? The LP is like half an hour long or whatever. If you get the CD version, they had like an extra half hour. And so they put this sermon at the end of it. For those who are listening that aren't familiar, Shelter was like a Hare Krishna band. And so they put a sermon at the end of it from their, like, I don't know what you call, like, priest or spiritual leader or whatever they're called. And listening to that way back in 93 or whatever changed my fucking life because one of the things he talked about there was this concept of Dharma, which if you have watched the show Lost, you'll remember the Dharma Initiative. That's a concept from Krishna consciousness or Hinduism, which basically means like the path that you must take as an individual. So like the Bhagavad Gita is about this guy named Arjuna that, you know, is a warrior, but he doesn't want to be a warrior. And Krishna's like, look, this is what you were put here to do. You have to be a warrior. Every organism has a dharma. For example, bees live in hives and make honey, right? That's what they do. And beavers live in lodges and build dams. That's what they do. Why would you be any different as a human? Like, what you should always be doing is looking at the things that you believe and ask yourself if those map to reality, because oftentimes they may not. And so if you look at reality, I believe that, you know, everyone's different. You know, humans probably have a little bit more variation than bees or beavers do. But there are things that make humans happy and there are things that do not make humans happy. Yeah. And chasing materialist bullshit has never made anybody happy. I listen to a lot of fucking content from a lot, like all I listen to is basically like business podcasts. I've never heard a single fucking person ever in any interview ever, and ask yourself if you have, anybody say that money or fame made them happy. Have you ever heard any human on the planet say that? No, not truthfully. No, people have said it sarcastically or in jest, but absolutely not. No, not a single person who has attained wealth or fame has said, yeah, no, this is great. You should definitely chase fame and money. That's going to make you happy. Zero people. And that's, I'm not just saying like that on a macro scale of like, don't try to be the next fucking, you know, Britney Spears or whatever. I mean, on a micro scale, just like trying to impress your neighbors or other people in the scene or on social media, or like, you know, if you think, if I get this new car, it's going to make you happy for like a fucking hour.
Yeah.
And that's it. And then it's going to go back to like having to confront yourself, which is the hard part. So, you know, by all means, I think people should I mean, having no money sucks. That makes your life worse for sure. But, you know, once you have achieved that, it doesn't fucking matter. So, so I guess that's my thought. What is the meaning of life? I don't know the answer to that, but I would encourage everybody to like seek truth at all times. That's I believe the move. Seek truth obviously you're not going to find it tomorrow, but if you're constantly a seeker of truth, you'll get a little bit closer every day.
Absolutely, man. Seek truth, listen to Shelter and Downset, and you'll
Seekers
be
of the truth, like the Cro-Mags.
Yeah.
Another Krishna band.
Right on, Finn. Thanks, man. Happy holidays.
You too.
Oh, yeah. That's a wrap on episode 52 of the Sailor Jerry podcast. As always, huge amounts of respect and gratitude to our guest, the one and only Finn McKenty. Finn, thank you very much for your time, man. Really cool getting to talk to you about music and your life. Really appreciated that extra little bit at the end there, too. Really, really cool combo. Thank you again for your time. You know, you can follow Finn out there at Finn McKenty. You can follow Punk Rock MBA on YouTube. You can follow me at 213 Matt Man. You can follow Sailor Jerry at Sailor Jerry. Follow yourself right over the borderline of 2022 and into 2023. Full steam ahead, ladies and gentlemen. Happy New Year to all. The next time I see you, we will be in January. And, we keep rolling. So, I'll see you guys in 2 weeks. Do not forget that Sailor Jerry Spiced Rum is still made the old school way. 92 proof, bold and smooth as hell. Peace.